This is the story of my greatest project yet and how I became a woodworker. This project, I will be building a live edge Russian olive kneeler from some large slabs that I got for free from my uncle. This project turned out absolutely incredible, and I think it's one of my best projects yet in the year and a half that I've done woodworking. This project started with going up to get a lot of free wood from my aunt and uncle. They have a sawmill, and there's a lot of offcuts and things that they're not going to use, at least in the near future, that they allowed me to take in exchange for building this kneeler. And I'm really glad I did. I loved this project, and I learned a ton through it. So the first thing that I did on this project was build the legs, and I flattened them using my planer, which I will show how I did it, and then I jointed one edge with a hand plane and ripped the other with my table saw. I started my woodworking last summer, just making some simple swords and other simple projects, and over the past year I've grown from just making swords to selling over $1,500 worth of projects in just a year. My tools have come a really long way, and so has my knowledge. I'm completely self-taught from YouTube, and I'm only 16 years old. I love this hobby. It's something that I can turn to every single day, and that I just love to do. So this is how I flatten boards after I sold my jointer a while back. I use a simple planing sled made out of a flat piece of melamine, and I fix the board to the planing sled using some double-sided tape, and I put in some shims where I need to. It's really fast, it works incredibly well, and it produces a flat surface while I don't have to keep my jointer in a space that I can't really have a jointer just yet. Do woodworking for a while, but I didn't start till last summer because that's when I got my first table saw for free. We live in a city that has a Buy Nothing group, and it's basically a Facebook group that shows people who are willing to get rid of certain things, and somebody was getting rid of a large Ryobi table saw. It's one that had like a sliding table, and I used it for a while until I could upgrade to my current Bosch table saw. But that's what really kick-started my woodworking journey, just getting that one tool, and that allowed me to really put in the motivation to start. Woodworking is something that I want to do professionally in the future. Almost all of my tools are used or reconditioned, and they've worked really well for me. My DeWalt planer, the 735X, I got used for $300. It took a little bit of working to get it fully operational. It needed a new crank handle and some other things, but it works really, really well now, and I got it for about half price. My Bosch table saw was $200. My Festool CT MIDI vacuum I got from the Festool Recon site for $500. So there's always deals out there to look for to save you some money just to get started. At this point in the video, I'm making basically the supports that support the very frame of the kneeler. The supports that go up to the very top to support where you'd read your Bible or something on the top of the kneeler. This track saw, which I got reconditioned, is really the hero of this build. I used it in a lot of different places, both to break down rough slabs and to do a lot more precision cutting, but it's a really nice tool that I'm glad that I bought when I did. This project was a lot of milling lumber. Each time that I needed a new piece, I would just go back to the collection of slabs that I had, pick out another piece, and mill it into the next piece that I needed for the kneeler. It worked out pretty well, but I probably should have milled them all from the start. So that was one mistake that I will correct next time that I do this. But it still turned out completely fine. So now that I got all these boards milled up for the kneeler, I'm gonna cut some recesses into these boards so what the actual kneeler pad will be on will sit flush with the board. So I cut out the edges of this joint, and now I'm going to cut out the waist with my coping saw. However, this is an inch thick Russian olive, which is about as hard as oak, and I gotta cut a 6-inch portion of it. This might take a bit. So this wood is quite a bit more brittle than I expected. So it chipped out a lot, especially on this joint. So I'll have to find a way to hide that chip out in the future. I want to use quite a bit of glue for this. Okay, so now this project had a lot of sanding in it, and I will not be showing all the sanding because that would be incredibly boring to watch. What I'm using here is an abrasive nylon wheel with my impact driver to remove the outer cambium layer from the sapwood live edge. It turned out pretty well. I really like this tool for removing live edge. I just put my dust collector right next to it using a clamp, and it turns out really well, and it doesn't create as much dust as you'd think. The start of this summer is when my business really started to take off. I made a custom woodworking listing on Facebook Marketplace, just showing everything I'd built thus far in my journey, and it really did well. I got a lot of inquiries about custom woodworking that people wanted me to do, and I've made a lot of those projects for people, from charcuterie boards to I'm currently making a dog bowl holder. That's one of my biggest tips for people starting out in woodworking. If you're able to do custom work, just create a custom woodworking listing in your town. People will go to it and just start doing some custom work. It's a good way to get started, but I wouldn't recommend it for if you're trying to really grow a business. I definitely recommend it for getting enough money to buy all the tools that you need for growing a business, but it's not super scalable if you're making a ton of different projects, and it can kind of be a headache. Here is when the shape of the kneeler really starts to show. I'm using a design that I made myself. You've got a pad on the bottom, shelf in the middle, some posts on the sides leading up to where you'd actually pray. This design I've used before, and I think it works really well, and it's not too difficult to make. The hardest part of this project was probably milling up all the lumber for it. And the most time-consuming part of this project was sanding, of course. So that went pretty well. That was one of the less chaotic glue-ups I've had, but it's looking pretty nice. So I know that some people aren't gonna like the design for this kneeler. It's a very modern design, but by going with Russian olive, which is quite a hard, but it's a very unique wood. And that's what my client, who was my aunt, wanted. So I thought I'll lean into the modern, super different look of Russian olive and incorporate some live edge and some really cool pieces. And I think it's really nice. I know not everybody's gonna think that, but I don't really care what other people think. As long as my client's happy and I'm happy, that's good. So Russian olive is a very different wood. It's a brownish color. Don't quote me on that. I'm colorblind. But it's a brownish color. It's got some really cool live edge, but it's an invasive species to the US. And it's really brittle of a wood. It really tends to chip out a lot when used. When I was going across the grain with my chisel and just chopping, I do a lot of dovetails, so I know how all that should work in woods like red oak and maple, but it really chipped out a ton, and I had to fix it by adding some other pieces of wood to that joint to make it look somewhat natural. So it's a very brittle wood, but it's also quite dense. It's a little bit harder than oak, so it's not super easy to work, but I think it turned out really, really, really nice. For these joints connecting the posts to the top, I'm simply going to be using screws. It works completely fine in this 1-inch thick wood, and it holds pretty well, as long as I put some supports underneath, which I will in the future. I'm going to be hiding the screws with plugs. I'll show that in a bit, but it's an easy method to get started in joinery and in places where it wouldn't be super easy to use another kind of joint. So this is my really cheap drill press that I got from my cousin who wasn't using it anymore and didn't need it. I got a lot of my tools from him because he was moving out of a place that he could use those tools, and now he sadly can't. So a lot of those tools went to me, like the miter saw, belt sander, drill press, bench grinder. So that was a really good help in my starting woodworking. But I use, for doing these kind of joints, a 3/8 inch plug cutter and 3/8 inch countersink bit, taper countersink bit, and it works so quickly and so well, and they can hide pretty good. So I think this is a really good method for doing hidden screws, and it works really well. At the start of the video, you might have noticed that I had a Bailey plane, a number 5, and you'll notice that this is a different plane. This is my new Wood River number 6, and I love it. I got it because apparently the sole on my old Stanley had cupped somehow. I still don't know how, but it was really cupped when it used to be flat. So I got this, and I do not regret it one bit. It may have been expensive, but I love this plane. Here I'm simply adding some supports so that it doesn't flex at all when it gets pushed on from side to side, for example. We're finally into the finishing stages of this project. I'm now installing the shelf using the same joinery method that I did for the top, and it worked really well. This not only provides storage because it's a shelf, but it also provides quite a bit of structural stability. It prevents the thing from rocking side to side. So there's 2 reasons. From here, I installed the plugs into where the screws from the shelf are, and then I cut the plugs with my saw, chiseled them, and then sanded everything so that it was ready for finish. And the finish I will be using is Odie's Dark Oil. It really worked to bring out the color in the grain and pop out the darks. It works really well. I love this finish. Here are the finishing shots. I think this is one of my greatest pieces yet in only a year and a half of woodworking. This was an incredibly fun project to make, and thank you for watching.